Hey everyone, welcome to episode number 72 of New Slang. I'm Thomas Mooney, and on this week's episode, I am joined by country music singer Kathy Mattea. This one right here was really fun to do. I know I probably say that every time on all of these, but this one was super fun because it was kind of like just going back in history, going back in time, and talking to Kathy about, her career. She was super nice and generous with her time. It's one of those things where a lot of times people they don't necessarily want to talk about their old material. They want to just talk about what's on the horizon for them, their new material. But I was super happy that Kathy was so open to talk about her career at large. I kind of say it in the podcast, but I'll say it again here. So many of her biggest hits, they're really just, they're touchstones in people's lives. It's like 18 Wheels and a Dozen Roses, and She Came from Fort Worth, and Love at the Five and Dime, Walking Away a Winner. All these songs, they're a part of people's lives. And you really can't tell the story of country music without mentioning Kathy. So it's kind of surreal asking her all these questions about these songs and how they grew to be hers and how they have become a part of other people's lives. We really don't talk a whole lot about new material, but we do get into it a little bit. We mentioned the album Cole. That was, I guess, an album that came out around 10 years ago. I'd suggest checking that out. It's super rootsy, as is her last album, Pretty Bird, that came out last year. It's one of those things. Her career's is so long that she's kind of has morphed into a different kind of songwriter, or not necessarily songwriter because she's not writing so many songs, but a different kind of artist. And anyway, I know I sound like a broken record, but share New Slang with all your friends and family, and give it a 5-star rating on iTunes. Write a little review. It'll take like 5 seconds to do so. Subscribe to the podcast if you haven't. Follow me on social media as well. That's @_New Slang on Twitter. It'll be where you can find other things I've written and whatnot. So, yeah. Anyways, here is this interview with Kathy Mattea. So I guess where I was wanting to start with was, so many of the songs in your catalog, for somebody like me, or like somebody, a fan in general, you can't really tell your own story without having a place with, a lot of these songs, like 18, you know what I mean? Like, on a Dozen Roses, 18 Wheels on a Dozen Roses, or like, She Came from Fort Worth. These places are markers for a lot of people in their lives. For you, where do you remember the first time, you ever being approached with a song specifically? That what is?
Oh, I have stories for almost every song. I can remember almost every, especially the big ones.
Mm-hmm.
I can remember the first time I heard all of them. 18 Wheels was written by two brothers, and it's about their uncle and aunt. And I think their father had a gold watch, so that became the image that started the whole thing. But he was a long-haul trucker,
mm-hmm.
and when he retired, he fixed up a van and took his wife back to all his favorite places in the country.
Yeah.
And that's the refrigerator kicking on in the background here in the green room. And so they wrote this song, and I had discovered, I knew their publisher, and he had a wonderful sense about songs, and he was visiting with him one day, and he said, I'm starting to send, certain people just want me to send them tapes of different writers, composite cassette tapes, and I said, put me on that list. So one day, something from Paul and Gene Nelson comes in the mail, and I pull it out, and I start listening to it, and it was the third, I'll never forget, it was the third song on the cassette. And I was like, wow, I love this. I just remember the chorus going by and just feeling sucked in. And so I played it for Alan Reynolds, who was my longtime producer, and he said, "Oh, I love this, pal." I said, "Yeah, isn't that a great song? Who do you think should do that?" And he said, "You." But I think because it was about truck driving, for some reason I thought it was going to be a guy's song, but it's really a love story. It's a great love story.
So back in those days, were you always constantly just getting tapes like that? Is that kind of like how you were coming across these songs, or were there more like individual kind of pitches?
Oh, all
or
kinds
did
of
people?
stuff. I'd hear things. I remember being at a folk kind of writers' night thing in New York at the Bottom Line and hearing a song and tracking down the writer, and he wasn't even there. It was somebody else had sung his song, and I remember like Nancy Griffith. We had a mutual friend who had told us about each other for years, and he was like, "You guys would love each other, but she doesn't live here, so I need to tell you when she's coming to town." And I'd always be busy or gone or doing something, and one day I walked in the studio. Alan owned his own studio, and I said, and he never rented it out. It was his own place to work, but the door was closed one day. Somebody was in there. I said, "Who's working today?" He said, "Oh, that's Rooney. He's doing a record on Nancy Griffith." I was like, "Nancy Griffith?" And I ran into the control room, crashed her session. I waited till they were on playback, and I said, "Hey, Richard Dobson has told us about each other for years. It's me. It's you. I'm Kathy." And they were recording her version of "Love at the Five and Dime" at that moment. And then her publisher pitched it to me later, and it changed my life. That song.
Yeah, that song right there, like just the storytelling imagery.
Oh my gosh,
is just amazing of how it develops, and you see these ups and downs, and you see. I especially love like when she does that whole elevator thing.
When she does the.
And she talks about it like on the live versions. Like she'll talk about how that was like the sound of the elevator going. It's those little things, little nuggets like that really make songs lived in, you know.
I've heard so many stories about that song over the years. I had a professor, literary professor, interview me and say, "Kathy, that song is like an epic movie in 3 minutes." And I had heard Nancy say one time that it was done as an exercise. It was like, take a story you've written and put it into a song. And someone told me, even just recently, that she had written a short story that was that story. And she took that short story and changed it into that song. And it's just, I have to say, it has lived for me so well. I send up like prayers of gratitude to her every night when I sing that song.
Right. Well, whenever I guess that's on your third record, right? Around that time, that's whenever you really start gaining a whole lot of steam. Like you start getting a whole lot of top 10 hits with that record. In that moment, like during that time, did you feel that transition, or was it not until later that you realized like, oh, this was kind of a turning point?
Well, it was more like I'd made a couple of records and didn't have a hit. I had some things, kind of putter around on the charts, but nothing that you could call a hit. And so I didn't know if I was ever going to get one. And my record company, God bless them, they stayed with me. They were like, "No, we think it's going to happen for you, and we're going to stay with you." So they wanted me to cut a couple singles so that we could get some traction before we just put out another record. And "Love at the Five and Dime" was the first thing off those sessions. So I noticed immediately the difference, that they didn't have to sort of try to convince people. People were clamoring to play that record. I was like, really? And it just floated up the charts like it had a balloon on it. And I thought, oh, this is what it feels like. Like you wait, and then you get the record deal and you think it's going to happen, and then that doesn't happen, and you don't know if it will ever happen.
Right.
So rather than sort of seeing it as, oh, now I've made it, it's like one more rung up on the ladder. Okay, I got that, but this might be the only one. Some people only have one hit. And so I didn't know, and I never really felt. I never felt like I could have perspective on what was going on in my career till about 6 months to a year later. I could not tell when I was in it what was happening.
Right. I think that's always an interesting part, is like, I think it's just human nature in a lot of ways, where you don't necessarily, when you're in the middle of it, it's coming at you so quickly, or it's coming at you so slowly that you don't know which way is up. And then it's only until later you're able to go, oh, actually that was a good time, or that was,
Yes, exactly. I said to my manager one time, well, okay, so when when I make it to the height of my career, I want to blah, 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 blah. And he said, Kathy, I think you are at the height of your career. I was like, what? He said, well, you just won a Grammy and you're nominated for Entertainer of the Year. And I was like, oh yeah, I guess that's what that is. Mm-hmm. It never feels solid because everything's so predicated on everybody else's response, and you don't know. There's no way to know.
Going back to like the whole, you getting pitched songs and tapes and stuff.
Yeah.
What's like the one that got away?
Oh, the one that got away. The song remembers when.
Okay.
I can't even hardly talk about it. I mean, I can't believe I said the title. Sometimes I'll just allude to it. But here's what I've learned. I mean, I recorded the song Remembers When, and somebody sort of said, well, there's too many ballads on this record. You need to drop one. You should drop that one. So I dropped it, and it was just, sometimes you can't see the forest for the trees.
Right.
But by the same token, Don Williams had recorded Come From the Heart, and then he wasn't sure he wanted to do it, so he was going to release it. He was going to, take it off his record and not do it. And then he said, no, I do want to do it. So I didn't have that song, had it, and then didn't have it. And he put out his record, and nobody ever mentioned it in any of the reviews. They just didn't get a good cut on it. Mm-hmm. And I just waited. I felt like I had a little thing in my back pocket. I wouldn't mention it to anyone. I wouldn't say anything. And when it came time to make my next record, it was the first song I recorded. And went number one, and was Susanna Clark's first number one hit. And so that was that was like a real thing for her to look, from what I understand, what I've been told, to look Guy in the eye and say, I got one too. And the other one is, I had someone come, I won't say who it is, but someone came to me one time and said, 455 Rocket, I had it, I let it go. Mm-hmm. So you realize that, if you try to keep your heart in the right place and do it from your gut, you're going to miss some and you're going to win some.
Right. That 455 Rocket, that's one of those songs where, I was looking on Wikipedia earlier, and I guess it was like a top 20 hit, but I don't know if it's where I was growing up or like my parents played it a whole lot more. Had you asked me, I would have thought that was like the number one hit of the year, because it felt like it was always on wherever I was as a kid.
Well, that's another thing that you learn, is that the numbers really don't mean that much. Mm-hmm. I have records that are career records that didn't go number one, and I have number one records that no one remembers. Mm-hmm. And so, that tells you something, but not the whole story.
Right. Also, whenever I was getting all this stuff ready, I love like old music videos.
Oh,
and
gosh.
like you come from an era of these like those late 80s, early 90s music videos were a thing that.
Yeah, so we had money. They gave us money to make these videos.
What was like the most fun music video?
Oh, the very last one I did for Mercury, we went to Rome.
Okay.
It was so fun. The song was not a hit, but boy, the video was really... Everybody was like, I'll work on it for free just to get to go. So, a bunch of us went to Italy and spent 3 days filming and went into these little towns and based out of Rome. And this is my big memory from that, besides going to this little town and John befriending this guy in the middle of the town square and him taking him to his house for lunch and making homemade raviolis for him. We spent 3 days filming, and it was really an amazing thing. And then the very last night, we had some Italian people on our crew, and then we had people we brought from America. We all had dinner, and it was just this great kind of peak experience. And the director was a dear friend of mine, and he brought his kids, and it was just great. And we all walked back to our hotel, and our hotel is just behind the Spanish Steps. And we'd been walking past them every day. But this was like a weekend night, and they were full of people who just hanging out. They would go get a gelato and sit on the Spanish Steps and just watch the crowd.
Yeah.
And there was singing going on. And there was this huge crowd all crowded around these people with guitars, and they couldn't speak English, and they were from everywhere. And they were singing Beatles songs and stuff. And someone looked at me and said, "You sing good." And I said, "Thank you." And someone handed me a guitar, and I sang "Love the One You're With" with a bunch of people from all over the world who couldn't speak English but knew all the songs.
That's amazing.
It was a great experience.
Yeah, that's what, like, the whole music video thing. You remember, like, on CMT, they would show them, like, all day, where they'd have, like, a marathon of, like, these are the 100, I don't know, that kind of stuff. I remember seeing those as a kid, and, I don't know, just the one I was watching earlier this morning was for 18 Wheels and a Dozen
Oh,
Roses,
yeah.
and you're sitting at the, I guess like in a little truck stop or a
The
little.
Red Wagon. It was
There you
a
go.
restaurant in legendary little divey restaurant that just closed. That's been open for 40, 50 years.
You were wearing a George Strait.
Pie Wagon, sorry, the Pie Wagon.
Do you still have that George Strait sweatshirt?
I don't know. I don't think so.
I saw that and I was
but
like,
I was touring with George Strait at the time.
yeah.
And so we were all about being excited to be there, and we wanted to show how being on the road. What we decided to do with the video was to say, we're out there with the truckers all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I can remember being in an ice storm one time, driving back from a gig, and we were going down a hill and passing an 18-wheeler, and as we came around them, I was sitting in the jump seat by the driver, and as we came around, it was a black truck, and painted on the door was 18 Wheels and a Dozen Roses, and an airbrush picture of a dozen roses.
Yeah.
And I thought, I really want to honk our horn at this guy, but we're all it was so treacherous. I was afraid that he'd get excited and we'd have a wreck.
You're right.
But those kinds of things. There's a very symbiotic relationship between the truckers that drive at night and the bus drivers that drive at night.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it's the same hours. It's the same
life in a lot of ways.
Pit stops. The
yeah,
same.
exactly.
I know a lot of people that I've talked with that start out in vans. Right? They say how, I guess the transition from the van to the bus is always one where, back when we were in the van, we could go and park in different places, and now we're kind of. We don't have to drive, but we're kind of just stuck wherever the bus goes.
Exactly.
And
yeah, it's quite a transition. And you're not as tired, but you have to learn to sleep on a bus.
Yeah.
There's a whole other layer to it.
Yeah.
The other video was 455 Rocket. We went to a car studio in LA, and they had a big car turntable with a big light on the car. Mm-hmm. The light was $1,500 a day to rent. And they did car commercials. That's what they did. So that was quite an adventure just to see how they do that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. That's, it's amazing. Just how all of that just kind of got, I guess people still do music videos, but they're just not, the production's never as
they don't spend as
grand
much money.
or,
we spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on some of those.
Yeah.
And it was an art form, and it was another outlet to play your songs.
Right.
So it was really, looking back, we were just saying a few minutes ago how you can't see what it is when you're in it, but looking back, it feels like a bit of a little mini golden age,
Right.
The music was good, and everybody was creative, and it seemed like the doors flung wide open. Lots of people were welcomed. Lyle Lovett and Steve Earle and Nancy Griffith were getting played on mainstream radio. It was a wonderful time.
Mm-hmm. That it does feel like that time. I think we always when you look back and when you describe an era, if you will, you kind of have to just give it a little genre title, if you will, to describe everything. And a lot of people for that late 80s, early 90s, it's like the neo-traditional revival, all that kind of stuff. But there was a wide range of sounds.
Highway 101. And interestingly, I used to, it was really funny to me because they would call me traditional and they would call me progressive because I sort of straddled the fence. And I always had a good chuckle about that. But you know what Steve Earle calls that era? He calls it the great credibility scare of the blues.
I've heard that before. Yeah, it's it is interesting because guys like Marty Stewart were on the radio and they kind of just stopped being on the radio all of a sudden, even though they're kind of playing.
Yeah.
He produced one of your records, right?
Yes, he did. That was a thrill. Yeah.
What was it like working with him and
Well, I decided to make this record about coal mining, and it was all going to be Appalachian stuff. And I heard this stuff when I was growing up, but I was like a sponge. I would learn anything anyone wanted to teach me, except there was nobody in my world playing straight Appalachian music. I had a friend whose dad had a bluegrass band, and he taught me some stuff. But I didn't really have a mentor in that, and it was like going back and picking up something you'd missed. So I asked Marty to produce it, and he said yes. And I said, I'm so afraid that I'm not going to sound authentic enough. And he was like, oh, it's in your blood, Kathy. It's in your blood. And I was like, well, sometimes I'm really afraid because I didn't come out of the hills, straight out of the hills, and I didn't sing this stuff from the time I was born.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, just trust that, you know this place and you know this music and you have a right to sing it. And so, because he had come up through traditional music and played with Flatt and Scruggs from when he was young and was this mandolin phenom and, is like one of the great authorities on bluegrass and mountain music, I just trusted him. I thought, if Marty tells me it sounds good, I can just lean into that.
Mm-hmm.
And it was an amazing thing it was so relaxed, very easygoing, great players.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just one of the peak experiences of my life.
Was that something you had always wanted to do?
I'd had an idea for a record for a long time, either about West Virginia or the Appalachian Mountains or mountain life or home or something, but it would not gel. And then there was a big mine disaster and a bunch of people died.
Mm-hmm.
And I was torn up about it. I was like, why am I so sad about this? Why is this hitting me so hard? And someone said, that's what music's for. It's to help us process grief we don't even always understand. And I thought, well, maybe that's the record then. Maybe it's about coal mining. And both my grandfathers were coal miners.
Mm-hmm.
So the process involved going and picking up a lot of those old stories, family stories. And I knew the individual stories, but they began to make the bigger picture as I got into these songs, because the songs, spurred conversations among family members and stuff.
Right. Well, I guess I'd read somewhere, it was a great quote from you saying how when you moved to Nashville, you never felt like you became like a Tennessean. You were like a West Virginian living in Nashville. I think that's something that a lot of people can relate to when they move to a place like Nashville or Austin, or that they always kind of carry where they're from. That's what makes them that person, even though they're going to a center of music.
And in Appalachia, there's a real sense of place. Like the mountains that you grow up around become almost like part of your family. My parents knew all the woods around where they knew where the good mushrooms were in the spring, and where the slippery elm was when someone got sick and had a sore throat, and all that stuff. I think that was part of really what I wanted to sing about too. I think that's what drew me to that, was just, it felt like going. I had specific places that I could relate to from my family's stories, and I felt almost like I was. It was like inviting my grandparents and that generation to come sit down
Mm-hmm.
and enter my life in a different way.
Right. A lot of your music, obviously that record, and especially what you've done recently, these last, I guess, when did Cole come out? Like 2008 or so? So like these last 10 years or so, you have definitely dived into more of the roots, mm-hmm. Appalachian sound. But you can always go back and feel like you pluck a lot of different sounds in your old records that kind of, like there's still like there's a lot of mandolin. Was that all like intentional back then? Like that you thought
I
just
was drawn to it. I think I heard it a lot when I was growing up. It's so funny. I just did a thing with Rhiannon Giddens, and I'd never met her. And we were in a dressing room. She said, just yesterday I was listening to Last Night I Dreamed of Loving You. And I was like, oh my God, I haven't heard that in forever. And it's a real Appalachian kind of sounding song. I think it was, as Marty kept trying to educate me, it was in me more than I knew. I just didn't feel like an authority on anything. Mm-hmm. There's this moment when we were making the Cole record, and I had to do this song called Black Lung, which is Hazel Dickens' signature song, and she's like a wailer, like a banshee. She's like so raw and soulful, and it's like this iconic thing. And I had found my way into a version of it that I felt like I was mine, but then it was time to record it. So we went in the studio, and I did it one time, and Marty said, come on in, I think you got it. I was like, wait, that was just the first time. I mean, like, look, let's just see if I can do something better. Give me another chance. He said, come in. I was like, no, you don't understand. I mean, I'm a singer. Give me one more thing. I can probably top that. That was just my opening, I realized it was going to be Battle of Wills. And we were either going to have a knockdown drag out, or I was just going to have to go in control room, and when I walked in the control room, Mick, who has worked for Marty for a long time, worked for me for a long time, Mick Conley is his name. He was from Kentucky. He was standing there with tears streaming down his face, and his dad died of black lung. I knew his dad. And he looked at me and said, I think you got it.
Mm-hmm.
And then he was like, I got to take a minute. And Marty just said, you just don't mess with that, Kathy. You just don't mess with it. And I would have never let myself trust it with any other producer.
Yeah. Obviously, a lot of these songs that you've been singing, they've been around you. You've been around them. They've been around you for a while. I think the more you hang around a song, the more you understand what that song is, and you become, obviously it becomes a part of you, but like you understand more what it's saying today than you did when you first heard it. Is there any examples of that, like that you today that you go like, oh, that's what this song was, more about? This was,
oh God, there was a night singing Five and Dime, maybe 10 years in, and I was like, I hit the second verse of Love at the Five and Dime, and I was like, I know, but we're having so much fun. Please don't make us stop. Just give us a few more. Okay. Okay. I had so much fun now, Tom. I know, it's just hard when you're. So there was this moment when I'm singing Five and Dime, and I know this song. I know how to tell the story. And the second verse went by, and I thought, my God. Sporting Miss Rita back by his side, or took a shine to read his hand, and I thought, the way she uses language in this is just brilliant and economical, but gives it so much character. And I just came to, and I swear that song has like opened up to me more than one time over the course of the last 30 years. 18 Wheels is another one it's a very simple song, and there's no other way to do it. You can't rearrange it. You can't make another approach to it. And so one night I felt myself go, okay, here we go, 18 Wheels. Got to sing it for the people. Got to do 18 Wheels. Got to do it for the rest. I was like, I was kind of rolling my eyes on the inside, and I laid in the bunk that night on the bus, and I thought, this is the beginning of the end, Kathy. If you let this happen, this is how it happens for people in your position. You are the person. Can you remember how you felt when you first sang this song on stage? Can you remember that? Because it was the biggest gift of your life at the time, musically. So it's your job to remember that. So the next night I thought, oh gosh, our drummer Jimmy, he set such a great groove for this. I'm just gonna ride that groove like a horse, like it's a horse, and just sink into it. And the next night I thought, oh, Bill's solo is so beautiful in this. I'm gonna wait for that. And the next night I thought, I'm gonna try to imagine what it was like to be Paul and Jean in a room writing this song about their family, and I'm just gonna be in that room with them and bring that forth. And then the next night I thought, maybe there's somebody in the back of the room, and this will be the only time in their life they ever have a chance to hear the person they heard on the radio sing it to them. I'm going to sing it to that person. And I just started doing that every night. And about 2 weeks later, Jim, our drummer, looked up and he said, Jesus, what's happened to 18 Wheels lately? That thing has come alive. I don't know what's happened. And I never said anything to the band. And I think that's my responsibility. And it's also my pleasure, I was steered by a very wise person, Alan Reynolds, to be very judicious about the songs I chose, and now I'm reaping the rewards of that wisdom passed to me.
Mm-hmm. Obviously, when you're in the position that you have here, you're relating to I guess you go back and you form these relationships with these songwriters who, you've played their songs multiple times, or like cut multiple songs of theirs. Is there something about like just automatically relating to that person in a way once you kind of have cut one of their songs that like you can go back to the well and that, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
or
I know
like,
I know that they care about their writing.
Mm-hmm.
And just like it's my responsibility, it's those writers' responsibility to not crust over in their writing and stay fresh.
Mm-hmm.
So I will go back to the well. I just heard a song by Pat Alger, who wrote Going Gone and wrote She Came from Fort Worth and a couple other songs that I've done. He's still a friend who comes to our house for Thanksgiving every year. And, I just heard a song by him that I was like, yeah, that one, pal, that one. I might have to do that one. And it's thrilling, it's so sweet. I'll go hear him at the Bluebird or something,
Mm-hmm.
Somebody will pull something out and I'll be like, well, that's the most beautiful thing I've ever heard. Where did that come from? And then just, go and squirrel it away for the next time.
Right. I was going to say that, I guess, like, what do you go, what place do you go to decide this is how that song needs to be sung by me? Is it just like a natural kind of thing, or do you go through different versions of it?
It was much more natural and spontaneous when I was young.
Mm-hmm.
Now I think because I've done it so much and because my voice is different, I don't always know what it's going to do. So, and always, even before, like, there's songs that just don't sit good for a certain voice, so you don't always know what it's going to do. But what we'll do is Bill Cooley, who has played guitar with me for 29 years, we'll sit down with all the songs that we're thinking about, and we'll start digging into them. We'll try them in different keys, we'll try different feels, we'll try different tempos, and we'll see where they settle in. And then Bill might get a spark. Like, I did a song on my most recent album that Mary Gaucher wrote a long time ago called Mercy Now. And it was like, well, this has been done by a lot of people, and it's her signature song, so we can only do it if we own it,
mm-hmm.
and own our version of it. So we started kind of working on it, and Bill was like, came in one day and he said, what if it was a gospel song? And what if it was done with those kind of chords? And then that sort of turned it into kind of a prayer for me. And the whole thing just took on a completely different vibe, and was like, okay, that works, and I own that, and it's different than anyone else's version, so okay.
Mm-hmm.
But it takes a while and some experimentation. Every once in a while I'll find some old work tape on my computer that, it's like, whoa, I'm glad we didn't do that.
Yeah.
But it's what got us to the place that did work.
Right. It's such an interesting process of building a song and making it into something that's,
yeah.
Especially if it's been done a million times.
Yes.
Because I think a lot of people think, like, well, if you cut it the exact same way as the original, I'll just go listen to the original. And you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, exactly. I just heard on the plane on the way here, I was listening to a David Bromberg record, and he did an electric blues version of 900 Miles, which is an old train song that's an old folk standard that Odetta found. And it lives in a whole different... It's like, all right, dude, I bow at your feet for your arrangement skills. And that's, that's a creative process, too.
I'll get you out on this last question,
Okay.
because this is one of those things where I knew if I had ever come across any of you who had done this, I was going to have to ask about Romeo.
Oh my God.
Because it's such a, like...
You were sitting in front of your TV when you were young, weren't you?
Yeah, I was like... but I forgot about it for so long, and then I just came across it and was like...
Yeah. When Dolly calls, you just say yes.
Mm-hmm.
And... it was really, really fun. I remember it being a really long day. Just great fun. There was the part where you go in the studio and do your part, and then there's the part where we did the video.
Right.
And that was the really fun day. It was like, the best. We always say the music business is like high school with money. You're always like jockeying for position. It was like the best. It was like, the iconic person, called us all up and said, let's go have a party.
Right.
And Billy Ray is just the sweetest guy, and he was just kind of like, okay, all right, I'll play along. And so it was just very sweet and fun. And my memory from that day was that Mary Chapin Carpenter had not met Dolly before. She'd not really known her. And at the end of the night, I'm standing there with all my stuff packed up, and I'm standing next to my husband, and she comes walking across the room. The place is almost empty. They're just pulling the last stuff out. She comes walking across the room, and she just looks me in the eye, and she doesn't say a word. She just starts shaking her head. I said, yeah, I know. She was like, I said, yeah, I know. It's really, really different when you see her in person, isn't it? She's not supposed to be a human being, is she? And it's hard to put that body in your mind and think someone lives in that body all the time. It's pretty amazing. You know, it's like she's so iconic that you don't think of her. You almost don't think of Dolly as a person. She's like a character. But then you realize, you meet her and she's so down to earth. But it was just it was a wonderful. It was just like joy. That's my memory of that day. Just joy and fun.
Yeah. I think, like, just to end it on that note right there, I think what you do is, as a fan, as fans in general, you kind of project your own thoughts of who that person's going to be. You know what I mean? So that's what that's just kind of how we always just end up doing it. You know what I'm saying? Like, where you have the idea of who Elvis is, who Dolly is, and if you ever meet those people, sometimes they're just regular people.
Yeah, yeah. As much as she can be a regular person,
so
she really is. It's pretty amazing.
Well, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
Really enjoyed talking with you.